Today, we're stepping onto a battlefield where the front lines aren't drawn in the sand, but right through hospital corridors and school playgrounds. We're going to explore one of the most tangled moral dilemmas in all of modern warfare. Just think about that for a second. This staggering claim comes from an analysis of what are said to be declassified Hamas documents. It suggests a deliberate strategy embedding military operations inside the most protected civilian spaces imaginable. And that single idea forces an almost impossible question, which is exactly what we're going to unpack today.
Okay, so let's dive right in. Before we can even look at the evidence, we have to understand the rulebook. You know, even in war, there are laws. They're designed to draw a line between combatants and civilians. But, as we're about to see, that line, it can be razor thin.
So the basic principle is pretty simple and clear. Certain places are just off-limits. They're meant to be sanctuaries, totally protected from the violence of war. This is really a bedrock principle of international law, and it's all designed to preserve human life. But, and this is a huge but, there's an exception. That protected status, well, it isn't absolute. It can be taken away. But only if a hospital or a school is actually being used for military action. This one clause, it's the legal and moral pivot on which this entire situation turns. All right, so now let's turn to the evidence that's been presented to justify military action against some of these sites. We're going to look at the specific claims made by Israel, based on intelligence and materials they say they found on the ground. And this, right here, illustrates the core conflict perfectly. On one side, you have a hospital, a place for healing. On the other, the claim that it's a command center, a place for war. So the question becomes, can a single building actually be both of those things at the exact same time? And what's really fascinating here is just how specific these claims get. We're not talking about vague ideas. The evidence file points to things like rifles and RPGs found inside an MRI unit, a 55-meter-long tunnel discovered under Shifa Hospital, even a Hamas intelligence hub supposedly located right beneath the UNRWA headquarters. And there are even claims based on footage of hostages being moved down hospital hallways. Now, this quote, which is attributed to a captured Hamas document, seems to suggest this isn't just an accident. It's presented as evidence of a calculated strategy to use civilian sites as shields, making them, in their own words, the best obstacles to protect their fighters. And this is the question you have to ask, right? In the fog of war, how reliable is this evidence really? And does it meet that incredibly high legal bar required to strip a hospital or a school of its protected status? Because when independent investigators have tried to look into these claims, well, they've raised their own serious questions, casting this shadow of doubt on some of the evidence that's been presented. So let's look at the other side for a minute. When the IDF presented videos of what they called a vast command center under Shifa Hospital, the Washington Post did its own analysis. They found, quote, no evidence that the buildings were directly connected to that tunnel system. In another case, Al Jazeera investigated a supposed tunnel hatch at a different hospital and concluded it was probably just an entrance to a water reservoir. You see the problem? The core issue is that verifying any of these claims independently in the middle of a war is just extraordinarily difficult. Which brings us right to the heart of it all. So for a moment, forget politics. I want you to step into the shoes of a military commander on the ground. You're faced with what feels like an impossible choice, based on conflicting information, with lives literally hanging in the balance. Think about it like this. Imagine a dangerous criminal organization is running its entire operation from the basement of your city's main post office. They're storing weapons in the local elementary school. Do the police raid those buildings, knowing full well that there are innocent people upstairs mailing packages and kids in class, or do they stand down and let the criminals operate freely, endangering the entire city? What do you do?
So let's break this down. This is your decision. 1. Your intelligence is telling you there is a clear and present danger operating from under a hospital. 2. You're also aware that independent reports are questioning how certain your proof really is. 3. You know that whatever you decide, the lives of your own soldiers and the civilians inside are on the line. So, what's your order? Do you strike or do you hold fire?
Because we absolutely have to ask this too. What happens if you choose not to act? I mean, if the intelligence is correct, choosing inaction means you are allowing a military command center to keep operating, to keep planning attacks, and to keep endangering your own forces, all from the shelter of a protected site.
So let's zoom out. Let's see how this one, impossible dilemma, starts to build a much, much bigger picture. Because the decisions made here, they don't just stay here. They could set a precedent for the future of warfare everywhere.
Think about it. If this strategy of operating from hospitals and schools is seen as effective, if it successfully shields a military force from being attacked, what's to stop other groups around the world from adopting the exact same playbook? This conflict could be writing the rules for the next generation of urban warfare.
This quote from a military expert really just sums it all up, doesn't it? When those lines are blurred, maybe intentionally, the old rules of war become incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to apply. And that leaves us with a final, deeply unsettling question. When a battlefield has no clear lines, how do you even fight a war without destroying the very world you're fighting for?